I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We continue with the first epistle to the Corinthians. We've had a number of things, comparing man's philosophy to God's wisdom. Don't associate with sinners. Don't sue each other at the law. We have been bought by Christ for a price. All these wonderful things. Our last chapter was chapter 7, in which we have Paul's discourse on marriage. And it is for a specific distress, a specific trial that the Corinthian saints were experiencing at that time. He gives the counsel, either stay single or stay married. Don't try to change your conditions right now. But if you have to, if you are burning in lust, if you can't keep your hands off each other, it's better to get married than it is to commit sin. That's what we read. And now we are going to look at the Joseph Smith translation for chapter 7, because there are a number of translations here, some fairly significant. So first, verses 1 and 2. Now concerning the things whereof he wrote unto me, saying, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, I say, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So clarifying that this was the question, they had the idea to not touch a woman. It's better to stay single and not touch a woman. And Paul is saying, yes, but it would be better to be married than to commit sin. Now, in verse 5, where it says, defraud ye not one the other, we have the correction, depart ye not one from the other. Like I said, this clarifies, this is talking about a kind of weaponized sexual relation. You don't withhold sexual intimacy as a way of punishing your spouse. But anyways, verse 6 now reads, and now what I speak is by permission and not by commandment. And that clarifies that, yes, he is giving his own opinions here. This is not a commandment from God. In verse 9, it now reads, but if they cannot abide, let them marry, for it is better to marry than that they should commit sin. So just a little clarification. I like it. In verse 11, a small grammatical correction. Instead of but and if she depart, it is simply but if she depart. Remove the and. Verse 26 now reads, I suppose, therefore, that this is good for the present distress, for a man so to remain that he may do greater good. So like I said in the previous video, much of what Paul is talking about is, right now, there is something going on that needs the ministry to focus on it. And if men are married, then they have the cares of the home. They have to provide for their family. They can't focus as much on the ministry. And that is why Paul is saying, stay single, unless you can't keep your hands off each other. In verse 28 at the end, it says, instead of, but I spare you, it is, for I spare you not. In other words, everybody is going to have trials and suffering in this life, no matter what we do. Paul's not giving advice to avoid troubles. He is giving advice on how to handle them. Now, verse 29, we have fairly extensive correction here. It now reads, but I speak unto you who are called unto the ministry. For this I say, brethren, the time that remaineth is but short, that ye shall be sent forth unto the ministry. Even they who have wives shall be as though they had none, for ye are called and chosen to do the Lord's work. It almost sounds like what he's saying here is that the Corinthians are going to be called into the mission field. And so he's saying, look, the time's coming. We're going to need more missionaries out there. We're going to be sending you out. So don't get married right now, because you're going to be sent out. You're going to be going out there to preach. And it's just like in the modern day, we don't send young married couples out as missionaries. We tell the missionaries, as young men, young women, we're going to be sending you out. Don't get married till you get back from your mission. If you do get married, well, then you can't go on a mission until you're much older, until you're a senior couple. And that's what it really seems to be what Paul's talking about here. Is the same thing that we do now, is we delay marriage until our time of service in the ministry is over. But like he says, if you can't keep your hands off each other, then get married. It's better to be married than to commit that sin. But if you can stay single and devote yourself to the ministry for a time, Well, that's better. And it's the same thing in today. When we tell young men and young women, go serve mission. But at the same time, it would be better for them to get married rather than to commit sin. That's very interesting. We continue now with verse 30. Now reads, and it shall be with them who weep, who as though they wept not, and them who rejoice as though they rejoice not, and them who buy as though they possess not. So again, this is just making the grammar of this verse fit with the corrected grammar of the previous verse. And we actually will I'm looking at this. We continue. Let's just read now verses 31 through 34. And them who use this world as not using it, for the fashion of this world passeth away. But I would, brethren, that ye magnify your calling. I would have you without carefulness. For he who is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord, therefore he prevaileth. But he who is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. Therefore there is a difference, for he is hindered. There is a difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and in spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. This is really saying the same thing, just clarifications. And if you're unmarried, you can go out there, you can devote your whole self to the ministry. If you're married, you can't do that. There will always be something hindering your work because you still have the responsibility of caring for your family. Okay, now in verse 36, now we have this. But if any man think that he behaveth himself uncomely toward his virgin, whom he hath espoused, if she pass the flower of age, and need so require, let him do what he hath promised. He sinneth not, let them marry. So this is saying, you can become engaged. That's when you're to be espoused, to basically to be engaged. You're engaged to a woman, but for now you're devoting yourself to the ministry. But it says, reacheth or passeth the flower of age. Now back then you would become a spouse to a virgin or a woman when she was fairly young. Probably in her mid-teens is when you would become a spouse to her. You wouldn't consummate the marriage. You wouldn't actually marry and consummate the marriage until she was a bit older, 18, 19, around there. And so you become a spouse to a woman when she's young. She reaches the age where she should be getting married. And she wants to be married. Well, then marry her, because it's still a good thing. At that point, you've made the promise. You are already espoused to her. You've made the promise. You've devoted your life to ministry for a number of years. You can go back and fulfill the promise you made to your fiancé. Now our last one here is verse 38, which now reads, So then he that giveth himself in marriage doeth well, but he that giveth himself not in marriage doeth better. Now, I don't think Paul is saying here that to remain single is better than to be married. What he is saying is that if you give yourself in marriage, then your work in the ministry is not going to be as good. But if you don't give yourself in marriage, then your work will be better. It's all very fascinating, really. We leave it here, and we pick this up in chapter 8 next. So I will see you there.